There we are. All right. Hello. Welcome back. Sunday Speedrunner Spotlight, episode triple digit number of some sort. Don't remember anymore. Uh, let's jump right in as always and have our guests introduce themselves. Welcome to the show.
Hello, I'm DANNYB. I am mostly an Ocarina of Time speedrunner, and you'll find me at twitch.tv/DANNYB.
Straight to the point.
Yeah.
So this is going to be interesting because I'm one of the few human beings who have never, still to this day, never played and know next to nothing about Ocarina of Time.
Wow.
Isn't that
not only never played, but you don't know anything about it, huh?
well, I mean, you pick up a few things because it's such a
Sure.
popular speed game, so I'm familiar with it, but yeah, in terms of
Gotcha.
like good knowledge, yeah, just
Hmm.
next to nothing.
What's stopping you from picking it up casually?
Ah, not really
Not much of a
nothing.
Zelda guy in general.
Yeah, it's not a franchise I've ever touched really, which
Hmm.
yeah,
Okay.
but it's definitely on the list of stuff to do, but the
Yeah.
list is massive and that's usually what stops it.
Yeah, I
But
hear you.
surely we'll get there someday. So
Cool.
not not
Yeah.
not ignorant about it forever. We'll get there. But
Less ignorant after today, hopefully.
yeah, I mean that is the point. I do like to learn, so now's the
Cool.
chance to learn. And what better way to learn than have someone who knows a lot about it to help me out. So I feel
At
like
this
that's
point, I've probably forgotten more than I know. It's
oh
been so
well,
long.
close enough. It'll be fine. So um well the first question I ask here is how you discovered speedrunning. So and then we can go from there.
Yeah. I sort of discovered speedrunning well before I knew it was like an organized thing people participate in. Just like ever since I was little, anytime there was any sort of challenge that involved doing something faster, I was all about it. When I was like really little, it was like, I think the first thing I got really into was double dash time trials
Hmm.
when I was like 10 or something. And I still love that game to this day. And then I got really into Minesweeper for a while. Pretty much my entire personality in high school was all about Rubik's cubes and doing those fast. And then I didn't really stumble upon Zelda speedrunning or like everything up to that point was like things where time is almost kind of the point, right?
Hmm.
But it never really crossed my mind to try to do something fast where going fast isn't the point, like Zelda, right? Um, and so I mean, I've been playing Zelda forever since I was like 5, 6 years old when OOT came out. I had it on my N64 from like day one. Um, but I didn't discover speedrunning Zelda until I found someone doing the Majora's Mask 3-day challenge back in like 2012 or 2013 or something, and I was like, "Oh wow, that's like the coolest thing ever! I wonder if I could do that." I did, and that sort of led me to early Twitch, and then found a couple streamers that I really liked, and then started doing some glitchless runs myself back in 2013.
So it's been a
Yeah, it's just
while.
yeah, it's been a long time.
That's how it goes. The time that's the ironic thing. You try to save a bunch of time and the time flies. But
Yeah, I mean, it's been over a third of my life at this point speedrunning this game, and I'm not a very young speedrunner.
yeah, I'm getting there. So approaching year 8. So
Well,
I can kind of get it.
yeah,
And how there's people that have been doing it for like 20 years. So
yeah, yeah. I mean, see guys like ZFG who are even younger than I am, and yet have been on the scene for a solid 6 years before I even knew it existed. It's like crazy.
it really pulls everyone in and keeps them hooked forever.
Yeah,
You cannot
yeah,
escape the chains of speedrunning. Yeah, so 2013 was the start.
yeah, yeah. I didn't start streaming until probably like a year and a half later, but like back in 2013, I was trying to do like I had like no route. I didn't have any like recording software. I didn't have any split software. I was like tracking split times in an Excel sheet that I made. It was the Stone Age back then, man.
Mm-hmm. So did you have like a goal in mind, or were you just like, oh, this is fun?
For the first like year or so, it was very very casual. Like I would do like because I back then I was terrible. So a glitchless run of Ocarina of Time. I think my first attempt was like 8.5 hours, and then I was like pretty quickly under like 6 and 5 and stuff like that. But it's still a long period of time, and I'd never really done anything like that before, so it felt very much like a marathon at the time. Um, but then like about a year later, when I started really getting into actually like watching Twitch streams, and then I started to get really motivated to like join the community and get competitive and stuff like that. And so when I started streaming in like September of 2014, that's when I really started getting into it and started improving fast.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So made the Twitch channel and could actually like in theory submit somewhere. I forget when SRC like
Yeah,
started,
I mean
but
back then it was Zelda speedruns.
yeah,
That
okay.
yeah. Yeah.
I forget which communities had their own like websites for leaderboards and such, but
Yeah.
okay. Is that still like a active place?
Zelda speedruns has sort of like changed scope over the years. The leaderboards pretty much died forever when speedrun.com started becoming a thing. Maybe around like 2017 is when the ZSR leaderboards went down. They still exist, but you just can't submit to them anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, and then yes, then we were like most communication around the game was in like IRC chats and like Skype DMs back then,
Mm-hmm.
before Discord. Um, yeah, it was an interesting time.
I bet.
It was definitely less centralized back then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I myself was lucky to join right when Discord started, so didn't have to deal
Yeah.
with too much of the complicated old ways.
Mm-hmm.
At least SRL races, you still had to use the chat, like IRC chat stuff. I think
Yeah,
they
yeah,
still
yeah.
do it that way. I don't know. I haven't used it in years, but so I got a taste of it. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
no Skype groups or other chat messengers or anything like that. But it's nice there was still leaderboards somewhere before it became more centralized, so you could
Yeah,
compare.
yeah. I mean, Zelda community was lucky in that sense because it had a lot more early momentum than a lot of communities did.
Mm-hmm.
Because as such a large fan base that like it was definitely one of the biggest early communities, along with like SM64 and things like GoldenEye and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. I can't think of many like old Mario leaderboard websites or anything though.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like, no, there was plenty of forums where people would talk about that sort of thing. But as far as centralized leaderboards, yeah, I don't really know.
So yeah, Zelda seems like really lucky in that sense because I don't think there were too many of those. I
Yeah,
mean, what do I
yeah.
know? But just
It's
from
cool
what I've
to
heard.
go on Wayback Machine and like see the really early Zelda speedruns leaderboards from like 2010, 2009. Like, what did those look like?
So
A lot of it was like people who would just like record on VHS and like send into um oh geez, I don't know why the name is escaping me, but like really old centralized leaderboard websites that like banned glitches entirely and stuff like that, and
like Twin
just mods who
Galaxies.
didn't. Yeah, stuff like that. Things people who didn't know anything about the games themselves, but were just like trying to have some sort of proof call on leaderboards.
Yeah, I know. I know SDA was pretty centralized, but they didn't have like
Yeah.
leaderboards. It was like here's the best run we know
Hmm.
about. So it's nice to see that leaderboards did exist because it's hard to stay competitive if you don't know where the competition is.
Yeah, it's also good to have that sort of history now, from because a lot of these websites were owned and maintained by people who are still tangential to the community, even like 15 plus years later, and so we have that sort of like documentation from back then. So it's always cool to see.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, it's always nice to have historical data
Yeah.
always preserved somewhere. makes world record histories easier at least.
Yeah,
I know
yeah.
that's a big thing. So, and it is important just in general to know who found what and who did what.
So as someone who has been around speedrunning for quite a while, but knows not too much about Ocarina of Time, what's one thing that you always wanted to know about OOT?
Always wanted to know. I don't know
Yeah,
if
what's
I
something that like had caught your eye and you were like, "What the heck is that?" or something?
I don't know if there's anything specific. I mean, whenever I see a clip of that game, I'm just like, "Yep, classic OOT." I don't know what's going on, but it's cool. I
Yeah,
don't
it
know.
seems like OOT has always been the game where it's like it's just kind of like a technical playground almost, you
Hmm.
know?
Yeah. And again, my knowledge is incredibly limited, more than most people's, especially. But yeah, it
You're
just
mostly a Super Mario Bros. Guy, right? The
yeah, I
original?
mean, that's the franchise I grew up with and have stayed knowledgeable of mostly.
Yeah.
Um, I didn't really branch out too much as a kid, so I didn't
Mm.
try a lot of those other Nintendo franchises. But so that's
How'd your
kind of
name
why.
end up being Grand Theft Auto then?
That's the exception. When you need to when you get your first Xbox and have to create a gamer tag for the first time, you just choose the one game you have and make it work. But so that's how that happened. But yeah, the irony is that that game is like just completely disappeared from my playing since speedrunning took over. But
You excited about the next one though?
oh yes, of course, it's still probably my favorite franchise in general. Like San Andreas is definitely my favorite game just ever. But
That's cool.
oh yeah, so it still has its merit, but it's just not something I've ever streamed or anything. So I've
Yeah.
definitely had some people a bit confused, but there are reasons behind it. But yeah, in terms of like being more competitive with gaming, Mario just made sense for me, and
Yeah.
it worked out quite well. So can't complain.
Nice. Makes sense.
But
Got a
yep.
question in chat. How long do we think the speedrunning community has till all old hardware expires? I don't know. I mean, it depends on the hardware. It's definitely something that the Ocarina of Time community has been considering in terms of stuff like the N64. We've had a lot of people showing up saying like my cart is like dying at load and like my save file isn't there because cart batteries are starting to go and stuff
Mm-hmm.
like that. Luckily, that sort of thing is easily fixable. But
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah, I mean N64s are definitely getting more expensive to find a good condition one these days. I think we still have a while before it starts to become a real problem. I mean, luckily in terms of Zelda, there are 4 billion re-releases and some solid emulators out there. I know you guys have embraced emulators in your community too, right? A lot of people play on emulator on your leaderboards.
Yeah, Nestopia is like 1-to-1 with consoles, so it really doesn't matter.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's good.
there's other emulators that maybe have a few things a little different, but Nestopia seems to be like the perfect RTA kind of device for NES stuff. So yeah, we got pretty
That's
lucky
cool.
there. But yeah, even NES consoles seem to be hanging on pretty well. I feel like we'll never get truly to the point of everything expiring because I feel like especially with the community being so big now, people are going to find a way to like be able to always fix or replace old components and keep them going forever at this point.
Yeah,
So, and
I
again,
mean,
there's
in
always
in
a
the
backup.
N64 community,
Yeah.
there's like there's one of the biggest things that goes bad on N64s are the original controllers. N64
Mhm.
controllers just the analog sticks crumble to dust because they're
Yeah.
not not the most durable things. Um, but there's a huge market for like steel stick type controllers.
Hmm.
People craft like metal modules for the analog sticks on N64 controllers and sell them as like a thing you can just install into an existing controller shell. And these things sell out. Like people make batches of dozens or hundreds of them, and they sell out immediately. It's
Oh yeah.
amazing to see. Like there's such a strong desire to keep this stuff alive.
Hmm.
So when you get somebody who does it well, it goes fast.
Yeah. Without again, and it's not just speedrunning. Like, there's a huge, just in general, retro
Mhm.
like want, desire. So I think nothing will ever truly die. There's going to be some way to preserve stuff if
Yeah.
it's replacing parts or whatever, but yeah, people just care too much nowadays. Especially like I know video game preservation's a huge thing. I don't see why that wouldn't apply to hardware as well as the software. So I expect the community to not be fearful quite yet. We'll see how
Yeah.
things
I
go in
mean,
20 years, but
it's a little tough with, with Nintendo particularly, with how
yeah.
litigious they are on their IPs, or their hardware and stuff like that. It can be a little tricky. There's so many fan projects have been crushed the moment that they go public with, what they're up to.
Hmm.
So yeah, gotta be careful about that sort of thing.
Yeah, we'll see. But so far so good.
Yeah.
I think. But anyway, back to wherever we were. Early Zelda times. So you would submit to that Zelda website.
Yeah, Zelda speedruns. It's changed hands a few times over the years. Nowadays, it's mostly used as a wiki for I guess the more technical concepts. Like, a lot of people show up in the Ocarina of Time speedrunning Discord, and they want to know, like, what's a good resource for learning tricks, learning routes, learning the game. And Zelda speedruns has been around so long that it's often one of the things they ask about. Like, is this still the go-to place? And it isn't really. It's mostly like technical write-ups about like how things work really internally. Stuff, information that's interesting to know, but almost irrelevant to like how you like what you need to know to actually execute the things that you're doing in the speedruns. And a lot of there's some information about speedrun routes on there that's just very old, and
For
it's
nerds
tough.
only.
Yeah, kinda, and it's tough because Ocarina of Time is a game that has evolved so much over the years. Like, it feels like every couple of years there's some whack new glitch that throws everything into a new balance. And so it's like it's hard to make good documentation about something like that. Especially in terms of like what's fastest, what's best. Routes go through such big changes. Next year, this year it's Wii Virtual Console is the best, and then next year it might be N64 had a resurgence, and now GameCube suddenly is the fastest way because of this new thing. It's like it's very tough to maintain good documentation to direct newbies on the right path, and so it's like a lot of people lament the loss of searchable forums being like the surface of information on the internet, and like the fact that things are so centralized in Discord communities now, which is not searchable. But I mean, really, like there would be no way to have the kind of information we need in any format that isn't join a Discord and ask the right question. It's so complicated.
Yeah, I feel like OOT specifically has the most complexity of anything, just in terms of how much has happened, how big the community is, the scope of everything. Just it's you could
Yeah,
have like dictionaries worth of information written about it. I don't know.
yeah.
Most games
I've
aren't like
always
quite like that.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I genuinely think I could write a textbook myself with the amount of stuff I know, and that textbook would be 25 times longer if we included a bunch of other knowledgeable people from the community. It's hard to keep it all straight. But it makes for a really interesting game. It makes for a lot of storied history. The one downside to that sort of thing is that I feel like it probably turns a lot of newbies away, because like Ocarina of Time is not a particularly hard game to play, right? The skill that you need in order to get into it is not super high, but it it is a really big mental hurdle to know everything that you need to know in order to effectively start. And that I think that's a real weakness of the game, and like it's something that the community has tried to address with good documentation. But it's just so hard to get newbies over the hump of like like when you watch a Mario speedrun. This is the comparison that I like to make. When you watch a Mario speedrun, most of the time, a newbie will like understand a solid amount of what they're seeing. They'll understand enough to make them think like, oh wow, I could do that if only I practice, right? And then with something like Ocarina of Time, so much of what they're seeing is so divorced from the way that they casually experienced the game that it makes people think like, oh, I could never do that. And that difference is something that I really wish we could overcome as a speedrunning community, but it's really hard to get people to reach, bridge that knowledge gap.
Hmm. Yeah, what I know, or at least have heard from people that got into that game, is they already liked, doing glitches in games, and that really helped because that game's like, again, the glitch playground. Almost
Exactly.
do whatever
Yeah.
you want, so that's what turns people onto that game. But if
Mhm.
you're not like that, it's gonna be like, oh, I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, even someone like me back in the day, in 2013 when I was getting started, documentation was even, way worse than it is now, and things like IRC, I feel like were much less centralized than the Discord, so it was hard to ask the right questions to the right people. And so I found it overwhelming way back then to, get in with glitches, and so that's why I started with glitchless runs, and that was has been the biggest part of my speedrunning career is glitchless runs. I've done everything at this point, but back in the day, I was like almost exclusively doing glitchless runs, and that's what I got good at the game with. And I came to love that run, and that's why I stuck with it for so long. But the original impetus for it was like, I have no idea how to do any of that stuff, and I don't know who to ask. So,
Oh yeah. Well, at least it worked out, I guess. But
yeah, for sure.
so, how long is the glitchless run? At least back then.
So it's gone through a bunch of changes in terms of like what's allowed and what's not over the years. But back then, when I first started, the record was in the high 340s, 3 hours and 40 minutes ish. And then I started. I got my first like sub 4 hour run a few months after I started streaming in like really early 2015. I started contesting record about a little over a year later in like the first half of 2016. I think that's right when I first set the record. These days, the route that is closest to what it was back then in terms of the rules is down to about a 334 ish. I forget exactly, somewhere around there in the mid to low 330s.
It's interesting that the glitchless run is like 3.5 to 4 hours, and then you look at how any percent's gone, and you're like, yeah,
3.5 to 4 minutes.
yeah, exactly. It's like, oh, interesting. But
Yeah.
obviously, I do remember when any percent was, like in the mid to high, like 10-minute kind of era.
Yeah, yeah. For most of the game's modern history, the infamous wrong warp from Decatry to Ganon was found in 2012, and so the game hovered between like the 20-minute and 17-minute mark for almost a decade until the big computer science glitch SRM was discovered back around the start of like COVID ish, like around early 2020. And that's when the time really started to plummet because we were able to get away from the whole structure of like beat the Decatry and warp to Ganon, and instead we were credits warping directly from the starting village.
Yeah. But yeah, most of the history I've heard of was again the era before
Yeah.
arbitrary code execution. So
Hmm. Yeah, that's the one that everybody knows. In fact, it's so like deeply embedded in everybody's brains that like to this day, the SRM stuff, the credits warp glitches have been around for over 5 years at this point, which is weird to think about. But to this day, we have people showing up with the green leaf on their name in Discord who've never been around before, like asking in the any percent channel about the the wrong warp to Ganon from the Decatry because that's their perception of what the game's any percent is. It's so embedded. It's crazy how like so many people who really almost know nothing about the game, but that's the one thing they do know is that that used to be any percent and therefore it must be still.
yeah, I mean that was definitely its most popular any percent era. So it
Yeah.
does make sense. But what's that any percent called now? Defeat Ganon?
Defeat Ganon, yeah. And in fact, just we've been trying to shake things up a little bit, keep people interested in the boards, to keep things from getting stale. And so just last month we posed a like a community survey, just asking like, what sorts of things would you like to see different? And one of the things we asked was like, would you want to see? We have a category extensions leaderboard for like smaller, maybe less important or like less prestigious maybe leaderboards. It's like speedrun.com/OOT extras. And one of the things we asked on the survey was, would we want to see like maybe some of the more popular ones from there get promoted to our main leaderboard? And one of the routes that we had there was the classic Kakariko route, which is the old like wrong warp to Ganon speedrun that used to be any percent back in like 2015 and earlier. And so that is getting promoted to the main leaderboard like as we speak. So people can submit to like the legacy route because it's still such a popular way to like get into the game, because one, it was like it has the big lovable wrong warp glitch, but also it's not that hard to learn and it's pretty short. So it's like it's a great way to get into the game. So we figured, even if it's been obsoleted 25 times over, it's still worthwhile to have around.
Yeah, it kind of sounds like Mario 64's 16 star.
Kinda, yeah. It's like there are dozens of ways to beat this game faster, but it's got historical prevalence and some weight behind it. So
yeah, I mean that makes sense. I mean you can have as many categories as you want and make the rules
definitely.
for it. So as long as people care about it, there's no reason not to.
Yeah.
So, and again, with a community as big as OT, people are going to do whatever. So
yeah,
that helps. Yeah. So you stuck with glitchless specifically for it's interesting because at least the glitchless times I'm hearing sound like I've heard 100% runs that are faster than glitchless.
Yeah, the right now the 100% no SRM leaderboard world record is only a little bit slower than the glitchless any percent record. It's like 10 minutes apart or something like that.
Just shows how broken the game is, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. But there's actually it's a little bit interesting because these days there are two ways to play the game glitchless. It kind of like at some point there started to be a divide between glitchless players in like the mid 2010s, where like there were some things that the glitchless runs were doing that technically aren't glitches, but they feel like they are because of just the way that you execute them and what impact they have on the speed run. But like in terms of like the code and whatever, they're technically not a glitch, right? And then there are people who didn't like that and wanted to play only with things that make the game feel more like a glitchless run. And it's really hard to define that, but at some point back in like 2017 or so, we split glitchless into two categories. There was like glitchless more restrictive rules and glitchless less restrictive rules, and the less restrictive one was of course much faster. And that evolved even further up until today, where like we kept finding these gray area techniques that technically aren't glitches but really don't make the run feel like glitchless anyway. And we found so many of these that it really like started to make these two outlooks on what glitchless is distinguish themselves even further and further, and so they started getting even further apart. And it started making less and less sense to call the more restrictive one glitchless any percent. Because what people started to realize was that we were skipping so much of the game with these gray area techniques, right? That we realized that, oh, okay, anytime one of these new techniques comes up that lets me skip a big part of the game, like for example, I'll give you a good example. In Ocarina of Time, Shadow Temple, it's one of the last dungeons you do, right? And in order to open up the way to Shadow Temple, you need to have beaten the 3 major dungeons before it. You learn a warp song, and that song warps you directly to the entrance of Shadow Temple, which is otherwise inaccessible, right? But with some really precise damage boost tricks, which aren't really glitches, but you can do them, you can reach this spot early, and you can reach Shadow Temple very, very early, before you even touch those 3 dungeons that are supposed to be prerequisites, right? So the damage boosts, they're not glitches, but it definitely completely destroys the notion of the feeling of the glitchless run.
Like it's a sequence break, but not a glitch.
Exactly, right.
Okay.
And so we had people who hate that sort of thing, and people who really love that sort of thing. They're like, oh, it's so cool that like we can even do this without using any glitches, right? That's awesome, right? And so these two schools of thought popped up. And so what people didn't like about that sort of trick is not so much the fact that damage boosts are glitches, because even many of them will say like, sure, they're not, but they just didn't like that it skipped so much. And so what we started to realize was that like their outlook shouldn't be summarized as like restrictive, glitchless any percent, because they don't want it to be any percent. They want to do parts of the game. They don't want to get to the end as fast as possible, which is what any percent is, right? So we kind of reframed that outlook, and that category these days is called glitchless all main quests, where we said like, okay, here's the parts of the game that should be in a run that feels like glitchless, all the main quests of the game, all the dungeons, all the bosses, like things like that, right? And so now you have to accomplish those things while also playing without glitches. And then we have glitchless any percent, which is actually just beat the game as fast as possible without using glitches. Doesn't matter how much you skip, as long as the things that you're using to skip those parts of the game aren't glitches. And so that's down to like 2 hours and 9 minutes these days. And that's the category that I still have the record in now. But the one that, you know, was more like the glitchless back in the day is glitchless all main quests, which still is in the 3.5 hour range. So long history, even with just glitchless. Like it's kind of interesting that like Ocarina of Time has so many tricks that like it's just so hard to even decide what is a glitch and what isn't.
Yeah, it's crazy. You can save that much time just doing strategies that aren't technically unintended.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's pretty wild.
And yeah, I just know when you look at the leaderboard, there's so many categories. Maybe not like Mario World level, but still a fair amount. And it can be a little confusing, but again, all
Yeah.
of them have their merit of some sort.
Yeah, they all have lots of players, so you know there's something for everybody.
Mm-hmm. But let's see, how many categories are there now? Because I know there's
Let's see. Yeah, so there's a couple ways to answer that question.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're just talking about the main leaderboard for full game speedruns, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 top level categories, right? But then within those categories, there are subcategories.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, if I click on the glitchless category, within that, there's glitchless any percent, the shortest one, 2 hours and 9 minutes. Glitchless all main quests, the medium one, which is 3 hours and 35 minutes. And then there's glitchless 100%, which is 5 hours and 39 minutes. And you know, there's plenty of other categories that are divided into subcategories too. A lot of them are divided into SRM and no SRM leaderboards. SRM being a major glitch that, you know, turns the game into just a computer science spectacle, and you can really just do anything that you want. And it completely changes the experience of playing the game if you include that glitch. And so most of our glitched speedruns have variants with and without it, because you know the without it is the older way to play the game, the more like kind of beloved way to play the game.
And I guess just to answer the question now, what exactly is SRM? I know
Good
this might
question.
take a while, but let's
Yeah,
get it out of the
I'm
way.
down to go into it. Yeah, so it stands for stale reference manipulation. And let me see what's the best way I can summarize it. So when Link picks up something and he holds it over his head, and there's lots of different things you can pick up like that, like a rock or a piece of grass or a pot or, you know, anything like that. He gets a reference. Link's actor gets a reference to where in memory the thing that he's holding lives, right? And so every single frame, when Link is walking around with the thing holding above his head, he uses this reference to copy his own like data, like his position in the world, to the pot every frame, so that it like follows him as he carries it around, right? So Link just opens a data stream and is constantly sending data to copy to the pot, right? And then so now what happens if suddenly you do something sketchy to make the pot unload from the game, right? It unloads entirely, it disappears. Normally, Link will get the memo and he'll drop his hands and it'll disappear and the data stream will get cut off, no problem. But if you do some tricky stuff, you can make it so that the thing he's carrying unloads and Link doesn't get the memo. And so he keeps his hands up, holding visibly nothing, right? And he keeps the data stream open. And so he's sending data to some place in memory where the thing he was carrying used to be, but isn't anymore. It's just free open memory. And so if you if you arrange everything in the game perfectly right, you can intentionally load something else into that space to receive that data stream and therefore edit arbitrary aspects of the thing that loads into that space. And with really careful planning, you can really just edit any attribute of anything that can load in and out dynamically. And that is just very powerful, as you
Is it?
might guess. So yeah, basically the any percent speedrun uses this to edit the ground to be a loading zone, which sends you to the credits, basically, in the simplest possible terms. So you just you carry a rock, you unload it, and then you just walk forward, and the ground underneath your feet sends you to the credits. It's wild. It takes 3 minutes and 46 seconds or something like that from a brand new fresh file from the moment you wake up in Link's treehouse to warping to the credits. And you can just do anything with this glitch. You can quite literally do anything. It enables the more generic computer science concept of arbitrary code execution, right? Where you can write your own code into the game, and you're not just editing data, but you're editing code, and then you can get the game to run that code. So you can just turn Ocarina of Time into Frogger if you want, right? You can just do anything. So
Yeah.
it's pretty crazy.
But you have to be limited to what you can actually execute in real time as well. Obviously, if you're tasked, you can do whatever the hell you want. But
yes, but we do in fact have ways to make arbitrary code execution humanly viable, and the main way to do that is you can unlock the 8-character limit on file name inputs. So you can just type code with file name characters.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a little bit wacky. You are a little bit limited there because the values you can get from the Japanese and English and numeric character sets for the file name are not exhaustive for all machine code that you could possibly write. But it's enough that you can pretty much do whatever you want. Of course, a task doesn't really need to do this sort of thing because, as you mentioned, that they can just do whatever as fast as possible at light speed. But for a human, that's how you would do arbitrary code execution if you really wanted to. But in fact, arbitrary code execution is not allowed even in categories where SRM is. Just because it trivializes the concept of speedrunning. The only category where arbitrary code execution is allowed is any percent, because of course that's just going to be the fastest way to beat the game no matter what, whether we like it or not. And so it's allowed there, but we don't actually use it. It's not the fastest way, which is pretty interesting. Not anymore anyway.
Okay. So in the ace way, how does that work then? And why is it slower?
Trying to remember. This is starting to get a little old old knowledge. We haven't used ace since maybe 2021 as the fastest way to beat the game. And it starts to get really deep into the semantics of what counts as writing code and what doesn't. And it really basically when you want to use ace to beat the game as fast as possible, what you are limited to is editing one tiny piece of code to do something very impactful, right? So you want to find what is the smallest edit I can do that has the biggest impact, because really the whole deal with SRM is that you get to write one thing to one place, right? And sometimes that might be code or it might be data. And if it's code, then you're doing arbitrary code execution. If it's not, then it's just SRM. And it's really hard to go into details, but the fastest way that we had found to reach the credits back in the day, like in 2021 or so, happened to be editing code, and then now it just happens to be we found that you could edit the properties of the floor to be a loading zone, right? And that's we're not changing any code. Yeah, it's hard to go into any deeper though because mostly I just don't remember.
Fair. I mean, at a basic level, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Like the differences. Obviously,
Mhm.
I'm sure there are write ups that go into, again, the textbooks of information on
Yeah. I
exactly what's going on, but that
I
that's
actually have
beyond
like a
my area of
20 page
expertise.
I have like a 20-page YouTube script that has been sitting in my Google
Mm.
Docs for like a year. That I'm try I want to make a video about the history of SRM any percent. And the main thing that's stopping me is it's such a dry topic. It's so hard to like make it engaging because like you really just have to go into the nitty gritty. I mean, it's
Yeah.
rough, but like I feel like the story deserves to be told, even if only 100 people are going to care to watch and actually understand what's happening. But
I feel like a
I do
lot
have
of
that write up
people
somewhere.
would care. I mean, there are a surprising amount of people out there that like engage with the technical side of, content and actually find it fascinating. Even if they don't
Yeah.
understand what's going on, like I'll watch something and it starts bringing up the code and data tables or whatever. I'm just like, "Yep, sure." But oh, it's cool.
Yeah. Yes, I should definitely get that out at some point. It's editing it is also just a little bit of a scary nightmare. I feel
Oh,
like
I bet.
because yeah, it's so much like numerical information has to appear on screen, and it's like, okay, how do I present this in the most digestible format? So one day I'll get that video out.
Yeah, I mean, Retro Game Mechanics Explained does similar stuff. 100th Coin does that kind of
Yeah,
stuff. Bismuth's latest video had that kind of stuff with the ace of Pokemon. So
yeah,
people do like it, but I bet it, yeah, nightmare to edit, and because I know how long those videos take sometimes.
yeah,
And then you got to be very program knowledgeable sometimes, which yeah, most people aren't going to be, but there is a target demographic out there somewhere, so someone will
for
give a
sure.
shit probably. But yeah, I know it's very complex. That game has always been complex, but again, it is
Yeah,
one of the most popular speedruns, so there's got to be a
yeah,
reason for that, right?
yeah, for sure.
So that's SRM, and that can be used in pretty much every category to save time, pretty much. Obviously not glitchless, because I assume that's a glitch.
It is.
It sounds like one, but everything else, it sounds like you have to split into either not using it or using it, because it will pretty much save time in any category.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, for example, right, the speedrun record for all dungeons without SRM is about an hour and 12 minutes, and with SRM is 24 minutes.
Oh,
So
oh my, okay,
yeah,
yeah,
so
I know
Ocarina
100.
of Time.
I know 100% was like, three high 3 hour, and then with it is like low 3 hour. So that was the range I was thinking of, but
Yes, right, yeah.
that's a bit more
The
significant.
Yeah, for things like for goals where like it can be broken down into just like one thing, like do all of the dungeons. Like all you have to do is go to some places in order, right?
Hmm.
You can like basically just set up a persistent warp anywhere glitch that just sends you to exactly those places, right? With 100%, there are so many like prerequisites for like I have to do these things in like all of these orders. Some of it has to be as adult link, some of it has to be as child link, and so it's such a like a tangled web of requirements that it's really hard to shave it down too much, even when you have a do anything glitch available to you.
I see.
Yeah,
Well, now that I have a better understanding of how that works, I bet I can kind of more piece together future discussion here. But to get back into kind of your personal history, so you settled with glitchless for a while, which now sounds like the kind of unrestricted, like the glitchless any percent
hmm
is.
yeah. That was that. I set a record in that last year. Uh, it was 2 hours, 9 minutes, and 23 seconds. Oh, man, it wasn't last year. It was May 2023. Oh, geez, I'm getting time's just flying. But yeah,
Yeah.
so that is down under around 2 hours and 10 minutes. And I stuck with glitchless for a while. But as I started to get better and I started to reach like record potential in glitchless around like 2016, I wanted to start branching out more. And so I started making it my goal to try to become like as well-rounded a player as I could be. And so I started to play like every category and try to get good times. And the interesting thing about glitchless is that like, Ocarina of Time, you think that game, you think glitches. But just as important as learning the glitches is learning good movement, because the movement in that game is surprisingly complicated. There's so many options for traversal, with like walking backwards, walking forwards, side hopping, backflipping, rolling. Like how when do you roll? When do you walk backwards? How much should you space your rolls out? Like when should I, be jumping, or when should I? There's so many ways to move through the world, and so being a glitchless main guy, it taught me those fundamentals so well. And so I found that, when I would jump to a glitched run and I would just learn the glitches, I had such a solid foundation that I was getting really competitive times really quickly. And so I ended up being like a pretty dang well-rounded player. At one point, I think I had like 5 world records at once in the OOT, which was at that point was the most anyone had ever held simultaneously. I think that record has been bumped up to 7 now by some very talented people. But yeah, I started playing every category, and these days, my name is somewhere in every single leaderboard on the main boards.
Every single one,
Yeah, I
including
played every
sub
single
categories
category.
and everything.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I've done everything there is to do in this game, pretty much, including something that I wish more people would do. But Ocarina of Time has an individual levels leaderboard for like just running a specific dungeon, right? And those are a lot of fun. We have any percent ILs, 100% ILs, and glitchless ILs, where 100% means like visit every single room, open every single treasure chest, even if it's just like a rupee, right? Like you still got to open it. And glitchless ones are, you have to follow the glitchless rules, but more importantly, you have to follow glitchless rules in everything you do up until actually starting the dungeon, right? And so like your inventory and everything, all the items you have to be possible while playing the game glitchless before ever touching this dungeon. And that makes it a really fun puzzle to solve, because it's like, okay, we have so many tools at our disposal, even following the glitchless rules. We have the fastest glitchless path through the game that we do in the full glitchless run, but that's not necessarily like the path that you would take if you wanted to set yourself up to just complete this one dungeon as fast as possible, right? And so you get to spend, like, even if I spend 20 hours doing some really complicated path through the game so that when I get to the start of Fire Temple itself goes as fast as possible. That's a really cool question. It's a really cool like problem to solve. And so ILs have been like something I've spent a lot of time on too. It's a lot of fun.
So the start time is like entering the dungeon and the end time's finishing it, but for glitchless specifically, you have to like get there normally before you could start the
Yeah.
timer. Okay.
And so like you don't actually have to play through it. We have a rule that allows you to play on. We have a practice ROM for Ocarina of Time
Oh,
that's
okay.
like very feature rich. Like you can warp around, you can edit your inventory and stuff like that. So like the setup of your file at the start of the run just has to be possible
Okay.
with following glitchless rules. Yeah. Back in the day, that wasn't the case, and you actually did have to set it up manually, which is painful because it could take a long time just to then just go do one speed run over and over that lasts 5 minutes. But yeah, it's a really cool way to play the game. I like it a lot. It's not super popular, but I feel like more people should try it.
Yeah, I know ILs usually follow the wayside, especially in terms of like leaderboards and stuff. But
Yeah.
is what it is.
I've seen people who've been around the community for like 4 years, and they're like, "Wait, we have IL leaderboards?" And it's like, "Yeah, man, it's right there. All you have to do is just switch from full game to levels, and that's it, right on
Yeah,
speedrun.com."
yeah. I've heard stories that Mario 1 used to have IL leaderboards. That would have gotten stale very quickly. So I know
Yeah,
for some games it
yeah,
doesn't quite work, but for some it
I
does.
mean, for a game that's solved with
Uh-huh.
99.99% certainty, like yeah,
Hmm.
not much you can do. I mean, what you would have probably 30 people tied with a tied world record on every single board, right?
Pretty much, if not more. Um,
Yeah.
Depends on how you time it, I guess, to the frame or to the frame rule. But
Mm.
hell,
Oh, true.
even 8-4 is tied to the frame with tasks when that is counted without frame rules. So
Mm.
who
Has
knows?
there been any like RTA how fast like to the frame measurements in that community at all?
People
Like,
have kind of done it as like a fun challenge, but it's not like kept track of or anything
mm.
because
Are there
it doesn't
any
matter.
levels where it's like, yeah, you definitely can't match the tasks in terms of like going to the frame?
To the frame, I feel like I don't know. Obviously, most don't just because you don't have to. But
Right. But if you were trying to, if that was your goal.
I actually don't know because no one's ever really done that. Because now, obviously, this would have to be RTA only,
Mhm.
because left plus right helps a lot. But
Yeah.
I guess it's been done in a few levels that are a little more obvious. But yeah,
Mhm.
in general, it's not something we really keep track of. So I don't know like a definitive answer on it. But
Yeah. Fair. I feel like if there were IL leaderboards, that would have to be how they go, just to make it more interesting.
yeah, of course. But I don't
Yeah.
know. I'm just glad I wasn't around when that was a thing because they did it to like the in-game second. So
Okay.
yeah, kind of like
How, how fast does the timer go in that game?
I think it ticks down every 24 frames and it's 60
Okay.
FPS.
Right.
So, even almost a frame rule essentially. So slightly fast
Mm.
or slightly slower even, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, didn't have to deal with that, but for some games it works. Is the
Yeah.
point. Mario 1, no.
Yeah, I know SM64 has like a giant spreadsheet of single star records, and
Mhm.
most of the
Yep.
times those records are like unbelievable, like completely different from what you do in like a 120 run, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a fun rabbit hole to go down. But for SRC, their level leaderboards are just like the full stage RTAs, which are interesting
Right.
in their own way. But if you're doing like a 120-star run, technically you're also doing the individual stage RTAs. Sometimes it depends. The
Yeah.
routes vary slightly depending on certain factors, but for the most part, that's what you're doing. So
Yeah, maybe just go for something a little riskier that you wouldn't go for in 120.
yeah, but I do know people that if you get a gold split, usually that's just your new
True.
stage RTA
Yeah.
PB, so you just submit that. But again, usually I just focus on full game stuff unless there's like
Yeah.
a very specific reason to do an IL or something. So
Hmm.
that's a whole other world I don't really pay attention to, but
Yeah.
I guess
And
that comes with its downsides.
for a game like OOT, it's interesting because a lot of times, there are tricks that like, oh, if only I had this item when I got to Fire Temple, I could do this crazy trick, right? But in a full game run, it costs so much more time to go get that item before the dungeon than it would save within the dungeon. But then in ILs, you actually get to do that, right? Because it doesn't
Mm,
matter if you spend your time beforehand to prep yourself, because that's the whole goal. So the ILs very often differ a lot in their gameplay, and they get to show off some really unique stuff that doesn't make it into full game runs.
yeah, and that sounds a lot more unique than most kind of like IL stuff I usually hear about.
Yeah.
So that's cool, but that's also why I guess they're not as popular because people maybe make that assumption that it's just what you would do but shorter, but no, it is different.
Yeah.
Got to clear up the misconception.
Yeah.
That's what we're here to do. clearly. But yeah, so you branched off and just did everything. Sounds
Yeah,
like.
pretty much.
So like I guess maybe a brief like summary of each category since you've done them all.
Sure. Yeah.
Just because there's
Um,
so many.
yeah. So of course, any percent beat the game as fast as possible by
Mm-hmm.
any means necessary. Any glitches are allowed. The record is 3 minutes and 47 seconds, and it uses SRM, like we were talking about earlier,
Yeah.
to warp to the credits from within Kokiri Forest. And then you have 100%. 100% is interesting because there definitely are parts of the game that we do not do in 100%. But our measure of 100% is everything basically that ends up in your inventory maxed to its highest degree, right? And so like, I can upgrade, I'll get bombs, and then I can upgrade my bomb bag twice to hold 40 bombs, and that's the maximum, right? Along the way, there's supposed to be a intermediate upgrade called the 30 bomb bag upgrade, right? And you can hold 30 bombs in that one. That's not required for 100%. You only need to get the highest tier of everything. And using glitches, of course, you can skip a lot of the intermediate stuff. And 100% also doesn't require like opening all treasure chests in dungeons, all the maps and boss keys and stuff. Only the stuff that appears like in your inventory on the overworld is what's required for that category. So
Okay.
it's a little bit interesting how it evolved that way.
So OOT doesn't keep track of a percentage.
Yeah, not internally. So we
Okay.
had to define it ourselves.
I see. Okay. Because yeah, a lot
Yeah.
of Nintendo games, like I know Metroid for example usually does that, and that's a big, like item collecting kind of game. So
Yeah. I think Metroid is actually like the progenitor for percent category names in the first place, right?
maybe. I don't know the history of naming schemes,
I
but
think I've heard that before. That like any percent is like a Metroid thing originally,
hmm.
which is kind of cool.
Yeah, I know it was like a joke from spawning off of 100%,
Mhm.
like just because not every game you can do 0%. You have to make some sort of progress. So it's like, oh, any percentage.
Right.
That makes
Yeah.
sense. So, but yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't know where that stemmed from, but it could very well be E. I don't know.
So so that's 100%. There's SRM and no SRM variants. Excuse me. No SRM, 3 hours and 45 minutes. SRM is right around the 3 hour mark. And then we have all dungeons, where the goal is to beat all of the main dungeons. OT has 8 main dungeons, and also a bunch of mini dungeons, but those aren't required for this category, just the main ones.
Okay.
Are the ones that give you a medallion or spiritual stone. And the record for that is 1 hour and 12 minutes without SRM. And with SRM, it's 24 minutes. Pretty crazy. That's actually my favorite glitched category, the no SRM one. It's one that I've spent a lot of time in. I'm currently third place in that one.
And that's
Um,
just using SRM to like spawn a warp to go
um,
anywhere, essentially,
yeah,
and
pretty
warp to the
much. Yeah,
dungeons. Yeah.
the one that I like is the no SRM one though. I'm
Oh,
not I'm
okay.
not
I
super
see.
partial to any real SRM routes. I find them to be pretty samey, right? Because like
Hmm.
most of the time when you're setting up SRM, like even if the results themselves are pretty different, like being able to warp anywhere for an extended period of time in all dungeons, like the process to make that happen is very similar to the process of making anything else happen, and so it ends up making like the start of almost every SRM run feel very samey.
I
And so
see.
I tend to avoid SRM runs. They were a cool novelty like when they were first coming out, but
But
not
you've still
really
done
something I'm
both
interested in.
variants.
Yeah, I
Okay.
have.
So
um, and then we move on to GSR. This is
Ganon
like
source
one of the
requirement.
oldest Ganondorf source requirement. This
Yeah.
is like a run that has had so many changes over the years. It's like switched its identity. Like the route is very similar as it has been for over a decade, but the way that we frame this category to keep it on the main leaderboard has changed quite a bit. Like back in the day, it used to be it used to be any percent, no wrong warp, no RBA, which are two glitches that are very big glitches. Back in the day, they were like the two biggest glitches, right? So it made sense to have a category that asks, how fast can I beat the game as fast as possible without the two biggest glitches back in the day, right? And that's what this category used to be. And the route basically ends up being you skip the door of time to get to Adult Link as fast as possible, and then you get the bow from Forest Temple, and then you and you beat Shadow and Spirit Temples, which are the only two they're actually required to go to unlock Light Arrows, so you can beat Ganondorf. And so it's basically just like 2.5 dungeons, and then the end of the game. And then, but as time went on, like this was such a beloved route that anytime we found something that would make the route change, like for example, in 2015, we found a glitch that allows you to just glitch light arrows directly into your inventory, which of course destroys the whole thing, right? Yeah. So that got banned in that category. And so it ended up being no RBA, no wrong warp, no GIM, which is the new glitch, right? And then we were like, oh, that sounds really awkward. So we'll combine the RBA and the GIM into one umbrella term called no item manipulation, right? And so it was no item manipulation and no wrong warp, any percent. And then a little while later, a new thing was found that, like, you know, it's just things kept getting found. And so at some point we were like, okay, if we're just going to ban every new glitch that comes out, clearly this isn't an any percent category anymore. This is like, we want the route to look like this. We want to complete the game like this, right? This is not how fast can you beat the game without this set of glitches. This is how fast can we beat the game according to this kind of path through the game. And so we reframed it to be like, okay, rather than being any percent no XYZ, this is now a goal-based category where you have to complete a certain portion of the game. And so it's called Ganondorf Source Requirement these days, which basically boils down to you have to beat Ganondorf. That's the overall goal of the game. And any item you get has to come from a natural source of the game, not a glitch. So source requirement. And if you basically follow that overarching rule, you can the route that we like just sort of shakes out naturally, which is kind of cool. And that is an hour and 6 minutes these days.
Okay.
Then we have MST, which is very, very old, popular category. It's been around forever. A new record. First, second place, third place, and fourth place are all within the last couple of months. So a very active speedrun category, which is awesome. It's really cool to see high-level competition on like fresh routes.
What's that stand for?
MST stands for Medallions, Stones, Trials. So like the adult dungeons, when Link is adult, there's 5 adult dungeons, and they give you medallions. As Child Link, the 3 main dungeons give you spiritual stones, so medallions, stones. And then Trials is like the Ganon's Castle mini dungeon at the end, right before going to beat the final boss. So that's the goal of that category, is to beat all the dungeons and complete Ganon's Castle at the end. And it also bans some glitches that, like, it sounds very similar to all dungeons, right? But this category, because of its legacy status, bans some glitches, and also the trials requirement at the end, like doing Ganon's Castle, actually forces you to get a lot more stuff that you wouldn't have to get in all dungeons, because in all dungeons that's not required to complete.
Okay.
So the record is 1 hour and 40 minutes, just under, and it was set just this month, which is pretty awesome. Then we have Glitchless, which we talked about, all main quests, any percent and 100%. We have Defeat Ganon, which was a thing that only came into being after SRM was discovered, because basically, like, once we were able to warp to the credits basically immediately with SRM, we were like, okay, well, maybe it's useful to have a category that asks, what's the fastest way to actually beat the final boss? And that's what this is.
So this was 90% before SRM.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
And there are no SRM and SRM variants of this too, as well as we just promoted the classic Kakariko route, which is like the old any percent from like 2012, the first iteration of the Deku Wrong Warp to Ganon. We have a dedicated leaderboard just for playing this legacy route through the game, just because it's so popular.
So these are all subcategories in the Ganon. Okay.
Yeah. The cool thing about this one is that for a long time, for about 4 years, after we created the Defeat Ganon leaderboard, the route stayed the same as it was from before SRM was discovered, right? Which was still the Ganondorf Wrong Warp, right? Still the Wrong Warp from Deku to Ganon. But my biggest contribution in terms of glitch discovery to the whole game was something that upended that. It was like the fastest way to defeat Ganon is no longer the Wrong Warp from Deku to Ganon. So I have a cool video on my YouTube channel that goes into detail about this new glitch that got found. But way back in the day, in like 2017, I posted a video on my YouTube channel where I was like, something really weird happened here. I was in Dodongo's Cavern, and I was messing around with like a glitch that duplicates the contents of rooms in the dungeon. And then all of a sudden, like all of the collision in the dungeon just like vanished. Like Link was falling through floors and walking through walls, and I was the only reason I wasn't falling to the bottom of the map is because I was using glitches to levitate around and explore what was going on. And then my game crashed, and I was like, I have no idea what happened. I'll just post a video, and that was it. And then 7 years later, last year, someone was looking into it, and they were like, can we recreate this? And what if, like, I think when the game crashed there, I think something actually interesting was happening. And what if we could use it, like, what if we could crash on purpose to, like, do something better than just crashing? And it turns out that what I was actually doing was, it was possible to create a new kind of wrong warp from that situation. And it's just nuts. And then, funny enough, like the guy who messaged me like with this idea based on my old video, he couldn't get it to work. And then without any planning or anything, I was just like, all right, I'm gonna go try your idea. And I stumbled upon wrong warping straight to Ganon's castle, just out of nowhere, within 5 minutes of testing this, which is probably the luckiest I've ever been in my entire life.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was it was a crazy moment. So basically, the idea now is that the fastest way to defeat Ganon without SRM is this new glitch that I helped discover last year that goes to the Dodongo's Cavern instead of Deku Tree, and wrong warps straight to Ganon from there. It's a really cool glitch. I actually did it at GDQ last summer. So yeah, that's a cool story. So that's defeat Ganon. Then we have two more. No wrong warp, which is another very old category back when wrong warping was like the big new thing, and it was an interesting question to pose to ask, well, what's the fastest way to beat the game without wrong warping? That is 38 minutes without SRM and 16 minutes with SRM. With SRM, it's pretty funny route. Like how can you beat the game in only 16 minutes without wrong warping? You use SRM to turn yourself into Adult Link, and so you can immediately just go to the final boss normally, which is pretty funny.
Great.
And then the last one is one that is actually just newly added today, right before I got on this call.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, good timing. Right before I got on this call, I was migrating some runs from our extensions leaderboard over to the main leaderboard because we're promoting this category. It's called Nocturne RTA. One of the warp songs in this game is called Nocturne of Shadow. It's the song that lets you get to Shadow Temple once you beat Forest, Fire, and Water Temples. And making it the goal of the run is pretty interesting because it forces you to beat a bunch of dungeons as fast as possible. It's a very like intermediate path through the game. It's great for beginners. So we figured it would be a fun run to have on our main leaderboard. It has a lot of competition, especially for a run that started off on extensions. There's like 70 something submissions to it. So it's pretty cool. And yeah, that just got added today.
Yeah, great timing then.
That's everything we got.
Yeah. And again, you've done every one of these runs.
I haven't done Nocturne yet.
Oh, okay.
This is brand
but
new.
now it's there, so you have to.
Now I got to do it.
Yeah, okay. That makes sense. Well, that's a lot of categories for the main board, so kept busy, it looks like.
And there are dozens on the extension board, and then there's ILs on top of that. So
Yes,
there are a lot of ways to enjoy this game.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have to ask, what's fun about that's on the category extensions board? No, this is just pure curiosity.
Yeah, no, there's some stupid stuff on there. Let me tell you.
Oh, I bet. I hope, actually.
I'll give you some highlights.
Okay.
Let's see. So, probably the most interesting one on there, like the most legit interesting one, is low percent, I would say, and zero pause. Those are some of the coolest ones. Low percent asks like, what is the minimum amount of the game required? So any percent is like, get to the end as fast as possible. Doesn't matter how much you finish, right? Low percent is like, doesn't matter how slow you go. Do as little as possible, right? When that's a really interesting question to ask. And it turns out that it is possible to beat Ocarina of Time in only 2 items. Okay. Using only 2 items. So that's the solution to low percent these days. There's zero pause. Is it possible to beat Ocarina of Time without opening the pause menu a single time? Yes, it is. And that's interesting because pausing is how you equip items, which is like your entire arsenal. That's how you do anything, right? So it's awesome that that's
obviously
possible.
A lot of things need frame advance, which pausing helps with. pause
Yes,
buffering.
exactly.
So
Yeah, 100%.
removes that too.
Yes. And there's some cool stuff like max percent child and max percent adult. Max percent child is like how much of the game can you complete as child Link without ever becoming adult Link. It's pretty cool. Max percent adult is,
Vice
similar
versa.
concept for adult Link. No doors. Is it possible to beat the game without opening a single door? Yes, it is. Um, and we have some just straight meme categories, like all cows. Just go milk every cow in the game. Makes for actually a genuinely interesting speed run. We have my favorite is Mweep percent. King Zora does it, you have to get to his infamous sliding across his throne Mweeping cutscene as fast as possible, which you can do in 5 minutes. It actually showcases an extremely unique glitch that you can't see anywhere else, where you can force him to do it without the normal prerequisite in the game of doing it. Um, and then we have just ridiculous stuff like blue percent, where the goal of the category is to get all blue permanent items on your inventory screen. Everything blue that you can get in the game, you have to go do it. So
Sure.
we got some weird stuff on there, but all of it is fun in its own way. At some point in its history, every single one of those categories had somebody who was like, this is great. We got to make a leaderboard out of it. And then enough people agreed that they were like, yeah, let's do it. And then competed. So it's cool stuff.
Oh yeah. And then I know I'm personally aware of dank percent, which is
Oh, yeah.
fantastic. Yes.
Yeah, you can smoke a giant Deka stick.
Very important. Yeah.
The most important.
I love meme categories. So I know again, I stem from Mario 1, so that's what I have to compare it to, but we don't have anything that's like absurdly funny or anything. It's just like here's a different way to beat the game or do this objective or whatever. Pretty simple stuff. So
yeah, I mean,
fun
I saw just recently. Was it? I think Cosmic aired a 0 point task,
yes.
which is so cool that like people can come up with these challenges that turn out being possible. 30 something years into 40 years. Is this game 40 years old?
1985. So yep.
Oh my god, that's crazy.
Yeah. The best part is, yeah, you can still discover new things sometimes.
Yeah.
A little more rare, but possible. But
Yeah.
I think everyone knew about the score rollover anyway. It was just like how fast can you do it in a task, and there it is. And apparently that project took a long time because they kept, of course, discovering it being faster and faster to do, and then you have to redo the whole task because that's the fun of tasking.
Oh yeah.
So, yeah, but for Mario 1 category extensions, I think we have over 50 different categories.
Oh wow.
So, yep. And most of them are just, do this, but don't do this or whatever. I don't know. Second quest, both quests.
What's your favorite one?
Oh, gosh. You see, that was my home for a while. I had like half the world records at one point, and then, not anymore, but it was a fun time. But, God, I don't even know. I mean, my favorite was Glitchless, but then it was promoted to main. So. So, that's nice. Let's
That's
see.
cool.
God, I don't even know. Just way too many. Yeah.
So how does glitchless differ from any percent? Is it just like clipping, and that includes like flagpole glitch
yeah.
or like any sort of clipping at all?
Yeah, no wall jumps, no flagpole glitches.
No wall jumps. Okay.
It's basically just no wall jumps and no flagpole glitches because bullet bill glitch is a flagpole glitch. No wrong warps, obviously, but that's really that's really all it is, I guess.
And I guess the pipe clip at the end of 1-2, right? And you can't do that.
Yeah, that's a wall clip.
Right. Okay.
Okay, sorry. Wall jump, wall clip, flagpole glitch, wrong warp. There we go.
Cool.
That's like everything that you can do in that game. But yeah.
How much time does that all add up to? What is it, like probably 15 seconds or something? Less?
8 seconds.
That's all. Wow, that's crazy.
Any percent is 454.5. Glitchless is 502.6.
That's cool. It's
Mm-hmm.
amazing. It is amazing how much wild effort goes into those 8 seconds.
Both runs tie the tasks into 8-4. And then yeah, it's just 8-4 frames now. But
Cool.
glitchless has less, I think. I don't even know. What
I
do I
guess
know?
glitchless 8-4 is easier because you don't have to do the turnaround. Is that right? And or the wall or the plate.
Oh, you'd be surprised.
Oh, okay. Well, what makes it harder? What are some things in the glitchless
I
one that
think
you don't have to do?
overall it's, well, if you're like, tying the task, quote unquote. Actually, I don't know if anyone's tied the task glitchless.
Oh,
I don't know about that. But and obviously people have any percent. But you basically have to do everything you have to do already,
mhm.
except you can't do the wall jump. So instead you have to do this incredibly precise block climb where you like hit
Ah,
the
right.
exact corner of it and then like frame perfect jump your way up without losing speed, which is a thing you can do.
Yeah,
And then
in
you
some respects, the wall jump is probably easier, right?
overall, yes, it would be an easier technique.
Cool.
And then instead of doing the wrong warp, you have to like frame perfectly jump and do it on a frame where you skip over the plant because there's a plant in the pipe you have to go down. And you have to skip over its
Mm.
collision to get in. And that's the whole thing. And to start that room, you have to do what you normally do anyway. And then, yeah, it's basically the same to the end from there. But
That's cool. I love when doing something glitchless turns out to be more complicated than doing it with glitches. It's one of my favorite things
well,
because
the
including in Ocarina of Time too, because like like ISG for example, like infamous OOT glitch where you like turn your sword into a buzzsaw that deals damage every frame. Every single
yes.
fight with ISG just becomes like totally trivial. You walk up to a boss and you're like, "Here's my sword, bro," and then he dies, right? But then in glitchless, like you can stun lock them if you perfectly time every single hit, so like to keep the boss down. And so it turns into like 1 frame perfect glitch to get ISG versus 10 frame perfect sword slashes. It's like it's
Hmm.
so cool to see those differences.
And yeah, I would say like, oh, it's cool. There's these differences. The other 7 levels are just like basic strats. The only thing is like 4-2, you have to take the vine, and
Mhm.
um, there's a really hard frame rule to get that only one run on the leaderboard does the record. But
Oh wow,
yeah, other people have done it in like an IL, but not very many. Only like I could probably count on one hand how many people have gotten that frame rule, honestly. But
that's cool.
yeah. Anyway, that was my favorite because I held the record for 4 years and took it from a 503.5 to a 502.9 without adding any other frame rules. It was all 8-4 frames.
Whoa,
And in
that's
fact,
cool.
the current world record has a slower 8-4 than me to this day. So I feel pretty good about that. It was pretty ridiculous. I think it's like only 4 frames off, but still,
Yeah,
frames in Mario
it's an
1
accomplishment, man.
are hard. So, but yeah, there's just so many. There are some like Game Genie codes runs. Those are fun. My first ever world record was a Game Genie code run for Mario 1.
Oh, that's
So,
cool.
historical impact. But yeah, that we can't get as crazy as, OT can do with its basically do whatever. You can make Link smoke a joint. We can't do that in Mario 1. So, you know,
Not yet.
not well, yeah, they can do arbitrary code in Mario 1 now. You just need to like swap cartridges while CPU cycles during certain CPU cycles. We'll get right
Easy.
on that, easy. But yeah, surely through that method of arbitrary code execution, if we really wanted to, we could make that possible, I guess.
Yeah, doesn't even have to. You can make Link smoke a joint in
Yeah,
Mario. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
the joys of arbitrary code execution. You can literally do whatever. But yeah, can't do that RTA yet.
Yeah.
You unfortunately can't swap a cartridge every like 0.00005 seconds or whatever. So is what it is. You can with a task bot now though. That has been proven. They can like set it up where you can do this inner cycle cart swapping method.
Wow,
So it is
that's
possible
cool.
on console to do arbitrary code execution. Can a human do it? No. it it is a fun world and a rabbit hole, but I feel like for every game, like almost every game, there's some way where it's possible, and it's always just like this
Way too
insane
hard
rabbit
for a
hole to go
person.
down. Yeah, or like
Yeah.
for the most part, usually, yeah, it's too hard for human to do. But there are the rare cases that are fun.
Yeah.
Like again,
Yeah. I mean,
Mario World,
it's a
Mario
miracle
3.
that like it's a miracle how much stuff has turned out to be humanly viable in OOT. You know,
Mm-hmm.
like uh, there are so much stuff in this game that in other games would have fallen by the wayside too early as being too hard to do because Ocarina of Time's movement is so perfectly repeatable. Like, you know, a roll goes the same distance every time. A side hop and a backflip goes the same distance every time. And like when you target a wall and you get that wall's angle every time, you get in a corner, you get in the exact same position down to the float every single time. And so it's like it's really cool that like, you know, the setups are so like you can do a setup with 300 steps, and as long as you memorize it, you're gonna end up in the exact same position every single time, really reliably. It's yeah, it makes the game really interesting because of the amount of wildly complicated things that are going on under the hood that are totally within our control that wouldn't be in most other games.
Yeah, and again, that game has just so much going for it. Its movement, its setups, its everything. I think
Yeah,
that's why
it's
it's
really the
one of the
perfect
most
storm.
yeah. I don't know if it's to this day the most popular game, but it's certainly up there.
Yeah, you know, in the past few years, it's definitely dropped off in terms of popularity, in terms of like how many runners are at it day to day. And I think that's because there are a few reasons. One is that randomizer for Ocarina of Time, it was like one of the first most popular randomizers that came out,
Mm-hmm.
and like it as perfect as OOT is for speedrunning, it's even more perfect for randomizers.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can't like it is the game to randomize. There's so many cool ways to play with a randomizer, and like I totally don't blame it. But like, back in the day, if you wanted to play OOT in a new way, you were speed running it almost
Mm-hmm.
almost all the time, right? Like you would have, some people were going to do like a 3 heart challenge or something like that, but for the most part, speed running was what you did when you wanted to play the game in a new way. And now a huge portion of that group of people has come over to something which is less difficult to get into, like randomizers, and that makes a lot of sense. So that was one big blow to the size of the speedrunning community. But then also, I think when SRM got discovered, it definitely kind of like changed people's perceptions on the game. Because I think what a lot of people thought is that like, oh, the OT community just embraced SRM, and now every run is just a mess of computer science that nobody can understand. And it's not true. Like they saw, the most visible category was always any percent, because that was what got thousands of viewers back in like 2016, right? And so when that changed because of SRM and it was like no longer a recognizable route, I think that sort of like colored people's perceptions of the entire speedrun game.
Mm-hmm.
And so like, we have SRM and no SRM versions of every category, but I think a lot of people who were tangentially aware of OOT speedrunning just sort of got it into their head that like, oh, it's all just like, crazy, unfathomable stuff now. So I'm not going to try to touch it. So that I think that was another big factor that sort of like knocked us down a peg a little bit. But we still have a lot of, quite a few runners that are active, and the Discord gets hundreds of messages every day. So
Mm-hmm.
there are definitely communities who are less active than we are.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, that sounds like all of OOT that I need to know. I guess I feel a lot more educated now on how, at least some of the specifics. Obviously, not the technical details, but that goes beyond most people anyway.
Yeah.
But I guess
If you were to ever do an OOT run, what do you think it would be? If you were to ever pick one just to try.
what's the easiest one?
Hmm.
Hmm.
I mean, honestly, probably it's any percent using SRM, only because
Oh.
you only got 3 minutes of content to learn. So how hard could it be? But overall, probably the category that has the lowest skill ceiling is glitchless. Although there is a lot of stuff to learn, so it's a little bit of a tricky question to answer. But
Yeah,
some one of those two probably.
I think personally for me, it's not a game that would ever interest me in that way.
Mhm.
Like, what I would like to do is I need to casually play it and then watch speed runs and be like, oh, I get it.
It
But
is a very good casual game.
yes,
It's definitely still worth playing even in 2025, I think.
I want to go through like the whole Zelda series because again, I've touched maybe a single game in that franchise for an hour. That is all I've done.
Oh, really? Which
Yeah.
one?
Um, I got Breath of the Wild and
Mm.
beat Great Plateau, and then just never played it again.
Well,
uh,
I can tell you that the Switch games are very much not representative of the vibe of the series as a whole. They are
well,
definitely outliers.
to be
They're hugely
fair,
popular, of course, but very
yeah,
different.
I didn't quit playing because I got bored. I just there was no really reason for it. Like I've always, as my name probably suggests, I like open world games. So that actually
Mhm.
like, I was like, oh, Breath of the Wild is like an open world game. I might like it, but I just no reason for it. I just stopped playing and never got back to it. But
Fair enough.
I'll get I'll get there eventually. But yeah, it's just hard. There are a lot of games out there, and a lot of them are good. And there's limited time, unfortunately, especially when you're a speedrunner and most of your video game time is playing the same one instead of new ones. So
Oh yeah.
little hard, but it's on the list for sure. And if I ever
I'm
did do it, just because it's such a huge game, I'd probably stream it even. So
cool.
yeah, we'll get there,
Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't see it being in like my speedrun future.
Yeah.
Just
Not for everybody, for sure.
yeah, it's not my kind of speedrun game. I guess I like, I don't know, platformers more. When we get into like, if it gets like overly technical, like I'm like too stupid to get to that level. So it's like, I don't know, but it is a visual spectacle that I enjoy every time. So
Yeah.
it's got that going for it. But anyway, I did want to ask about other games because we have only talked about OT, but I'm sure you've had to try some other ones too, right?
Yeah, yeah. In terms of speedrunning, I have spent some time with Double Dash back when I actually learned that speedrunning was a organized community thing that
Hmm.
people did. I went back to my old, 10-year-old love of it, and I found out pretty quickly that the hours that I put in when I was a preteen actually made me pretty good.
Oh,
So I ended up
cool.
yeah, I ended up once I spent some time learning some of the strats that I was unable to find on my own. Like I was putting up times that were in the top 50, top 20 in some cases of some of these ILs.
Mm.
And I had a lot of fun with that. I haven't touched it in a few years, but I've spent a lot of time on that game, and I'd like to go back to it at some point.
Did you just focus
Um,
on time trials or?
yeah,
Yeah,
just
okay.
time trials.
Got it.
But it is a really fun game, and to this day, it remains my favorite Mario Kart game. I think the way that the carts handle in that game and the way that you do mini turbos is really unique and cool.
Funnily
Um,
enough, that's the only Mario Kart I've never physically owned.
oh, really? Interesting. Have you played
Well,
it?
briefly, like 15 years ago, I
Hmm.
think, at a friend's house, because again, I've never owned it. But
Yeah.
yeah, I had the first two on Wii VC. I actually had the cartridge of Super Circuit, DS, Wii, 7, 8, the 8 Deluxe. I've had them all, except Double
Cool.
Dash. So
You
again,
think
that'd
you'll
be a
get
great first playthrough.
True? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a great game. Do you think you'll get the new one on Switch too?
Yeah, for sure. If I can ever get it. Again, it's an open world game, so
Oh, true.
it immediately sold me when I heard that. Like I was like, oh my god, this is like the game I've always wanted from a Mario Kart, like a cool open world kind of thing.
That's cool.
Because
Yeah.
yeah, I like open world racing games as much as like the Grand Theft Auto style open world kind of thing. Which
Mm,
it has open world racing in it, but it's a little more than that. But
right.
yeah, no, that's like my perfect Mario Kart game, and hopefully they can somehow add more content to it later as well, since it's just been so long since we've had new content.
Yeah.
Hopefully, hopefully it's fun. I know
Yeah.
nothing
Yeah. I
about
hope
it.
so.
um,
I'm probably holding off on getting a Switch 2 until there's some more first party games on it. But
yeah,
it definitely what they showed so far has looked pretty cool.
hmm I'm excited for it. But yeah, I would like to get a GameCube sometime because it has the Game Boy player.
Ooh.
And if I do, like Double Dash is definitely one of the games I'd look into because I love Mario Kart games and I have like no history with that really. And
Yeah.
yeah, that game has some really interesting shortcuts that seem really complex
Oh yeah.
in
Yeah.
comparison because like I know kind of how Mario Kart 64's that's like my favorite to watch. I know how
Mhm.
some of those work, and then my personal favorite's Mario Kart Wii, and that has its own ultra shortcut phenomenon. But Double Dash is unique in like almost not
It took
having a lot, but like
Yeah,
I
it
don't
took a
know.
long time to find any. Like
Yeah.
there was for a long time there was like the Waluigi Stadium one, and that was kind of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then over the past like few years, I think there has been a sort of like dedicated science community trying to break them, and they found a few more. But yeah, like no shortcut is definitely the more popular way to play that game.
Yeah. And then every shortcut is like this very complicated, al- almost like a Wii Ultra shortcut, but also kind of different.
Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah,
It's very interesting, I
yeah.
guess.
It's a great game.
Yeah.
Um, what else? What else have I done? So I mean, those two definitely make up the bulk of like all of my speedrun time. But I mean, I've dabbled in Super Mario 64 a little bit.
Yeah.
I've got a 16 star time around like the 18-minute mark or
Hey, me
so.
too.
Nothing. Oh, nice.
Here.
I feel like that's a rite of passage. Like everyone
Yeah.
has to do a 16-star run.
I mean, I do want to take
Um,
Mario 64 more seriously as well. Like I've done every category except zero because that's hard. But
that's cool.
what is your 16 star if it's 18?
Let me look it up.
I'm just curious since we both have 18.
1852.
I if scroll down just a tiny bit.
I'm 1,000 in second place. Hell yeah. Let me,
Just scroll down a tiny bit. Like 5 seconds. Did you play on N64?
probably not
Oh, okay,
actually.
well then never mind. Because I have an
Yeah,
1857. That's we're five
nice,
seconds
nice,
apart.
sick.
So if it was on the
Um,
N64 leaderboard, the joke was I would be just right under you, apparently. But
oh, true. Yeah, oh no, yeah, it was on 64. Look at
oh,
that.
well, there you go.
I didn't realize that.
Scroll down a little bit. But yeah,
I've done a little bit of Majora's Mask, you know, the counterpart to
yeah.
OOT. Surprisingly different
Is
experience
it
in
okay?
terms of speedrunning. Yeah, very much not the same. You know, they look and feel so similar casually, but from a speedrunning perspective, they are wildly different.
That's cool
But I
though.
did, yeah, it is cool. I did glitchless in that game, which is a bit under a 3 hour speed run. That was a lot of fun.
Hmm.
I did a little bit of Breath of the Wild back when it came out, and you know it was like so hype that you know you could rush straight to Ganon in under an hour.
Yep,
Um,
that was a big
yeah,
phenomenon.
yeah. But that's those are my only submissions on speedrun.com.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, I have mostly just stuck to OOT when it comes to speedrunning. Um, yeah,
seems to have worked out. So,
yeah, I built a pretty solid online presence with it, and you know
mhm.
I'm the admin of the speedrunning Discord for OOT, so you know I try to run community discussions and events and stuff, and it's definitely changed my life. You know, back when I was like in high school and college, I used to be like really shy. I had a lot of trouble like speaking to people.
Mhm.
If I had to like get up and do a presentation, it would be like the worst day of my life. But just, you know, like getting up on stream and talking to people all day long, it's definitely like you know improved a lot of things for me. Made a lot of
Mhm.
friends over the last decade and a half. It's pretty crazy.
Yep, I have a lot of similar experiences in that way. So definitely helps out. I mean, I host a podcast that I've done for over 2 years. I couldn't have done
Yeah,
that
man,
6 years ago or whatever.
that's really cool.
Hell, the first like few years of speedrunning, I didn't have a face cam. Actually, yeah, first 4 years, half my speedrunning career didn't have a face cam because I just was
Well,
uncomfortable. So there you go. Things can change.
yeah.
But wow. Um, yeah, I was gonna say just yeah, OOT has so much there that yeah, I don't. I it sounds hard to get bored of it. You just burn out of this category. There's like 20 others that are wildly
Yeah,
different.
And
That
then every
works.
few years, it's almost like we just get a new DLC in the form of some crazy new glitch. So,
Yeah,
it stays
it
alive like that.
never dies. There you go. But I guess since you brought up like community stuff, like what what are there in terms of like community events and stuff that people can get involved with?
Yeah. So, a couple of years ago now, I put on a big community event I called the OOT Championship Series, where I came up with like 10 challenge runs that I would announce like once every 2 weeks, and then people would have 2 weeks to be able to submit their fastest time, and then I would put together like a an event like on stream where I would just put together the top 4 runs and like play them back as if they were a live race.
Mm,
And there was like a community pot and stuff like that. So it ended up being like a $2,000 pot for the top few players, and it was a lot of fun. Um, there's races all the time. There's been OT is also a really great game for bingos.
oh, of course. Yeah.
There's a strong bingo community that's been around just as long as the RTA community for OT, and there's been Saturday Night Bingo has existed every single week for probably 12 years or more.
Really?
That goes on every single week. There's always at least a couple people who join Saturday Night Bingo.
That's
Um,
cool.
yeah. Um,
Yeah, I know
yeah.
OT's like the bingo game as much of it is like the randomizer game. Again, there's so much you can do with this game.
Yeah, for sure. Um, yeah, I guess what other community events are there? I mean, those are the big ones. Yeah, I think somebody is always like putting out like here's a puzzle I thought of, right? Or like um, ADEF, he was running a GDQ hotfix show for a number of years, and at least once or twice a year, he would have me on, and we would trade custom OOT challenges with each other. We would just like blind play them on stream. You could do really fun things with those sorts of things. There's just so many ways to tackle that game. You can come up with some completely arbitrary challenge that wouldn't make any sense in an actual speedrun context, but is interesting to play if you've never seen it before. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, there's so many cool things to do.
the game that keeps on giving.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I definitely want to dive into live events since we haven't really
Mm,
talked about that yet. So, do you know the first live event you either played for or went to?
yeah, sure do. SGDQ 2016.
Mm,
I played Ocarina of Time glitchless
yeah.
live for 150,000 people back then when I was just, kind of just getting started. I was a couple of years into my speedrunning career. I had just started to like get competitive at a world record level. I was like really, really hyped about that run. It was so much fun. I remember all that stuff like it was yesterday. It was like left such an impression on me. But I've been back to GDQ once more since then. Last year, I mentioned earlier that found like a new glitch that sort of revolutionized the defeat Ganon speedrun. And I played that new route at SGDQ last year, 2024. It was my first time back on the GDQ stage, the main GDQ stage since 2016. So that was fun. I've been to a
Hmm.
couple other GDQs in between though, just to hang out. That's always fun too. Been on the couch for a few OT runs for like ZFG and people like that. Um, I've been on Hotfix a bunch of times, doing various challenges and things, mostly with ADEF as the host, since he and I are pretty close. And then what else? What other live? Oh, I was at Ludwig's Fast 50 last year.
Oh
That was a
yeah.
lot of fun. Yeah, I did the same thing. It was like right around the same time as GDQ last year, so I did the same
Mhm.
run that I was in practice for. Um, yeah, that's everything I could think of.
Hmm.
Fast 50 was a really fun experience. Cool to hang out with a bunch of new people that I hadn't seen before.
Yeah. I know they're his next event's coming up in a couple of weekends actually.
Yeah, they just announced it. They just
It it's funny
put out the
because
call for it a
we
few
have a
weeks ago.
huge Mario 1 tournament the exact same weekend.
Oh no.
But the funny thing is, it's in LA. So
Oh,
it's at the SoCal Gaming Expo. Um
that's
which
cool.
yeah, it's in Pasadena and it's the same weekend. But yeah, we're in the same room as the Classic Tetris Championships. doing a whole
Sick.
speedrunning thing. Yeah, it's gonna be the biggest Mario 1 live event I think ever. So that'll be
Wow.
cool. Yeah.
Love to see that kind of stuff happen so like deep into a game's life, you know? That's
Mm-hmm.
awesome.
Yeah. Have there been like any OOT stuff like that? I feel like with the game this big, I don't. I guess live events are a little harder, but you know.
Yeah, I don't think there has been like, like a real like dedicated event just for Ocarina of Time. Like I don't no one's ever really like picked it up in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, it's been such a mainstay at the main events like GDQ and stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that I guess it hasn't really needed the exposure, but
Yeah, I guess so.
um yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah,
There's
it'd
just
be
so
really
much
cool to
there
see
you
something like
could
that.
do it.
Yeah, for sure.
I know our thing is specifically like only races, and it uses. I don't know if you've seen the technology by Flibbity Dibbity where all the
Yeah, like
they're fed onto the one
overlaying all the
screen. Yeah, yeah,
races.
okay, it's
That's
that.
so cool.
Yeah, that's what that is, and obviously that currently just exists for that game. So
Mhm. That's really
I'm
sick.
hoping that can branch out into more stuff, but people have to make it work, and that could be a little hard. I currently don't see a way it could work without it being like a 2D platformer, but
Right. Yeah. And especially like a 2D platformer where races are expected to be close,
mm-hmm.
where you can actually see multiple people on the same screen at any given time.
Yeah. I mean he does have like the bigger overview map on the bottom, so
True. Yeah.
it helps a little bit, but yeah. I'm curious where that tech goes. But anyway, yeah. Um so I haven't been to as many events as I assumed you would have been at, I guess. But
Yeah. No, I've been overall probably maybe 5 or 6 between ones that I've played at and ones where I've just been hanging out.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a little bit hard to get to them. I'm in New York and
Oh, okay. Yeah.
surprisingly, there's just not too many speedrunning things going on in New York that I've heard
That
of. Like
is
I would,
interesting. Yeah, there's not a lot
yeah,
of I guess the closest is HDQ is now in Pittsburgh, right? So
yeah,
that's
yeah,
not
not too far.
terribly far, but
Yeah, still got to get on a plane though, and at that
yeah, of
point, it's like
course.
all the same.
Yeah, just don't have to be on a plane for 4 hours. Oh, hell yeah.
Got my buddy.
This is the content we're all here for.
Oh yeah, this is Milo. Hi Milo.
Oh, beautiful. It's rare we get a pet on the camera, so. But I
He likes
always
to come say
welcome
hi
them.
every once in a while.
All right, so
Do you have
that's
any pets?
I did, but he passed away a year and a half
I'm
ago.
sorry.
That's all right. But it happens. Circle of life and all that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I actually work at a dog kennel, so
Oh,
kind of
that's
get my
awesome.
I kind of get my pet exposure there at the moment.
Yeah, that's really cool.
But yeah, did you submit since we just brought up the Fast 50 and the next Fast event is coming up? Did you submit to that?
I didn't submit to Fast 50. I did submit to this AGDQ or SGDQ coming up. Didn't get in,
Yeah.
but I had a cool idea for an event race. So I want to keep it on the down low because I do want
Oh,
to
okay.
submit it again in the future.
Yes, I will. I will not break NDA here. Don't worry. But
But yeah, I want to do the idea is something that hasn't been at any previous GDQs for OOT. We've done a lot of RTA, a lot of races, but this will be more in the vein of like custom challenges, but like pitting people against each other. That's the general concept.
Mhm,
So yeah, so I'm hoping that they accept the idea at some point in the future because I think it would be really fun.
mhm. I too submitted something that I don't think has ever been done before in general, let alone an
Ooh,
event. But no, trying,
no details.
gotta try again. Yeah, it's not that secretive. So I've done like one-handed runs at GDQ. I want
Hmm.
to do it, but for lost levels, which
Oh, cool.
I can't find any like evidence of someone doing a speed run with one hand of lost levels, and then so I thought it'd be a cool showcase, like first time ever, because I was able to get pretty good at it,
Wow.
but oh well, maybe next
Yeah. Good luck. Hope it gets
time.
in.
Yeah, especially since GDQ is focusing a lot more on more unique stuff. I'm hoping it's a cool direction because there's a lot of unique things you can do with speedrunning, and
Yeah, for
like with
sure.
your
Yeah.
OT thing, with my Lost Levels thing. Hoping for the
Yeah, I
best
mean,
in the
with
future.
they've put on what it's got to be close to 25 events at this point, so they gotta learn to shake things up, and I think they've been doing a really good job of it, keeping
Oh
every
yeah,
event feel fresh.
Jade felt like post COVID has felt different, but in a good way. Like
Yeah.
I know things were a little shaky, kind of like late 2010s, but
Hmm.
yeah, it really seems to be like just much so entertaining, like at all times, and I've really liked
Yeah,
that.
they're
And then,
thriving there. They've got tons of like between runs content and stuff like that with the
mm-hmm,
hosts and
yeah,
all that stuff. Yeah,
and of course, going there is like the highlights of my year every time. But that's more of a
yeah,
personal thing. But
a lot of fun.
oh yeah, um, trying to think of anything else. I guess I can ask more about like content creation side of things, since you said you made some videos here and there, but you can
Yeah,
dive more into
yeah,
detail about that.
sure. So I've got a YouTube channel. It's been up forever, but mostly in the last couple of years, I've been trying to focus more on putting out like scripted videos, essay type stuff. Usually dedicated to like explaining some technical concept or another in OOT, which like I'm surprised that there aren't more channels out there that cover OOT in that sense because it's such a deep technical game. But yeah, I've been trying to kind of become that guy for this game. And I've got some pretty good videos out there that explain some of the more popular high level glitches. And like I was saying, I want to do an any percent with SRM speedrun history. Just recently, I put out an any percent history before SRM. So yeah, I twitch.tv or sorry YouTube, DANNYB 21892. Couldn't get rid of the numbers on YouTube. Somebody has DANNYB and they won't give it up.
Mm,
Some guy who hasn't posted a video or commented on anything in like 10 years, but I can't get that channel. I want it.
mm. I have something similar, but well, first of all, you have to be like a partner, I think, to get rid of or change your name in that way
Mm.
for Twitch, and not there yet. And I haven't even tried YouTube. Not that big a deal to me, but it's funny on Blue Sky actually, the owner of GTA's without the numbers found me and like added me
Oh,
and was like, "Hey." So we had a discussion. I did ask like, "Would you ever give up the numbers?" And he said, he doesn't think he could. So I don't know if I'd ever be able to do it, but
dang.
because I don't know if the guy streams much or not, but
Mm.
I don't know. It was just an interesting communication.
Yeah. Yeah. I was lucky to get DANNYB on Twitch, like
Hmm.
right when the name changes started. I was able to snag it because I used to have the numbers on Twitch as well.
Yeah, I snagged GTA Snow numbers for Discord and Blue Sky because I was kind of able to do it just right away when Discord
Yeah.
introduced the whole thing. I secured everything, so that's probably why he
Yeah.
found me. He made a Blue Sky and tried to have GTA's, and it's like, it's taken. Take that. You have it everywhere but here. um, let's see. I'm kind of out of my usual questions and topics I go over, I think. I mean, is there anything over your speedrunning history we didn't dive into detail on that you'd like to?
Um, honestly, no. I mean, I think we covered a lot.
Yeah. I mean, there was a lot to cover when it comes to OT, but
Yeah.
I feel like I have a better understanding on how things work. I'll definitely check out some more content in the future. Again, I've kind of been waiting until I finally play it, but who knows when I'll ever actually get around to it. I should just consume content anyway at this point.
Yeah. Well, one thing I'll say is that if you ever wanted to get into it, and that goes for anyone watching as well, the Ocarina of Time speedrunning Discord is an unbelievably helpful place. I know the game looks scary to get into because it's a lot of visual nonsense and it's hard to tell what's going on without the foundations. But everybody in that server is fantastic. You will learn a lot, and you will ask a million questions and get a million and one answers. So definitely recommend joining up.
Overachieving.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely, it's always seemed like one of the larger communities in speedrunning for decades now. And Yeah, I'm sure nothing's changed, so there will be someone there to help you out.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, I'm really out of things to say, I think.
All
Really
right.
trying to rack my brain here, but I think I went over everything I wanted to.
Well, good.
And
That means we covered a lot.
yeah, and if you're satisfied with what we discussed, then so am I. So here we go.
Sounds good. Well, thanks very much for having me on. This was a lot of
Yeah, no
fun.
problem. Thank you for coming on and educating me on the topic. It's nice
All
to
right.
learn some new things, and I feel like you probably don't get the chance to tell someone new things about OOT anymore.
Yeah, it's just fun. Cool to talk to somebody who wasn't super familiar. That's awesome.
Hmm. Happy to
All right.
help make unique experiences, I guess.
All right. This guy says bye too.
Fantastic. What can't
Okay.
think of a better way to send this episode off. So well the last thing I'll have you do then is just I know you've kind of self promoted a little bit, but just anything else you wanna.
Yeah, sure. So I mean, on Twitch, I've actually taken a break for the last few months, but I'm getting back into it real soon. So you can find me on twitch.tv/DANNYB. And you'll find me doing a shocker, Ocarina of Time speedruns. Working on glitchless runs right now. And since we just mentioned earlier that got a new run promoted to the main leaderboard, I'll probably try to get my name on that leaderboard pretty soon, just to, keep up with having my name everywhere at some point. And yeah, on YouTube, DANNYB21892, and you'll find some cool videos about some deep OT topics if you ever wanted to learn more about how stuff works in that game. And that's where I'm focusing most of my time lately.
And the links are on stream and will be in the YouTube description, as always. But yeah, that's everything. So call it a day here. Yep. Thanks
All right.
everyone for watching, wherever you're watching from. And just stay tuned for the next episode because you really think I'd stop now? I've been doing it too long to stop now. All right. Take care and goodbye.
Yeah.